So CBS Sports saying massive hype, expectations surrounding the Seminoles will be put to the test right away. LSU is obviously the headliner, neutral site, but close to home. Unfortunately for Florida State, neither of those contests against LSU and Clemson occur within the friendly confines of Doak Campbell Stadium, so they're factoring in Clemson games on the road, road trip to Wake, road trip to Pitt, leading into a rivalry game against Miami. That's at home. Trip to Gainesville. So the other big out of conference games in Gainesville. So yeah, I guess Georgia Tech apparently has a tougher schedule. They don't get to play themselves, which is an easy win to a certain extent. But yeah, that's what CBS is Sports telling us about the Florida State schedule, which is no major surprise. I've always said, James, that I got to respect. There's not too many schools you can put in this category. Respect Florida State's approach to scheduling because they've got the Florida game to deal with every year, which Florida's typically better than they are right now. And then they go out and schedule another big non-conference opponent. Is there anything that you would like to see Florida State do with its future schedules? Do you care? Is this something you look at? Do you think they're approaching it the right way? With recruiting and obviously success in mind.
I think I don't really care. I think obviously I think we'll be leaving soon. But even if we stayed in the ACC, ACC is a Power Five school, so you're going to get a bid. You win the ACC, you're going to get a chance to go play for the college football playoff. And even moving forward next year, when they do the expansion, you're really playing. Obviously, you still want to win conference because you want to play for that bye week. But if you can't get the bye week, you want to make sure you're playing to be able to be in that final 12, which, I think it changes the dynamic of college football more than people want to agree with. But I think in terms of, like, you got Georgia that's supposed to be coming up, Alabama, which I don't think we'll see those games, with the SEC proposed to playing another conference game. I actually, if they think that this is Florida State's toughest, or we have a daunting, I think that's what the CBS articles
Daunting
started
and the
off.
second toughest in the conference.
Yeah, if that's what this is, okay, I want this. Because compared to what we've had in the past, just imagine like 2 years, Mike Norvell's first season, actually his first 2 seasons. You add Notre Dame to his mix. So there is going to be a time when we have Notre Dame added to the schedule if we remain in conference in the way that we are. So Clemson is tough. Clemson, LSU are tough games, but if Pitt is reasonably pretty good year in and year out. But outside of that, I mean, your Wake Forest that loses their quarterback to Notre Dame. Miami, while very talented, still has a lot to be desired, in particular from the quarterback position and the wide receiver position. Also learning their fourth new offense in 4 years. And then same thing with Florida. Florida's in a situation where they don't know who their quarterback is going to be. So, like, the games that on paper sound very difficult in a traditional year aren't. And I'm not going to try and make somebody fear North Alabama. And I'm not going to try. Southern Miss has Frank Gore Jr., who's a really good running back, but I don't think Southern Miss, if Southern Miss and Northern Alabama can hang with these Florida State teams, then that's a problem. And I know people want to they love to bring up Jacksonville State, but nobody was talking about Florida State as a potential playoff contender during that time. And also, before people really get into trolling, they lost to Jacksonville State, but immediately went out there and still almost went on a run where they became bowl eligible. So, like, they beat Miami, they beat a bunch of other teams and there were some games they should have won, including that Jacksonville State one. But I just don't see daunting. Boston College is way down. Virginia Tech is down. Duke is up. I don't know what to think of Syracuse. They play pretty good when their coach, when Dino's on the hot seat. So, but none of these games are as tough as NC State, Louisville. I mean, you got to think we had NC State, Louisville, Wake Forest, Clemson. Then you had that. I remember we were talking on this show. In particular, I wish shout out to Jason. Jason's doing very well down in Miami, by the way. Turning that NBC affiliate around. But Jason was just like we were going in talking about 4 losses. And I don't know if you remember, Mark, if you got the tape, but I was sitting there like, y'all are crazy if y'all see 4 losses on the schedule. But we had 3, but even those 3 injuries can attest for that. But that schedule last year was twice as hard as this one here. The LSU game is very difficult, and the Clemson game will be tough. Outside of that, there isn't a game where I believe Florida State will not be favored in that game. Heck, they're already double-digit favorites over the University of Miami. And that game doesn't take place until November. Now, if you took Duke, or if you took Virginia Tech off and you put North Carolina on, then I'm like, okay, now that's tough. North Carolina with Drake May, the wide receiver that I do believe they returned one of their top wide receivers. Don't think they have the running game, but Drake May's ability with his legs and his arm, it's going to be a pretty tough one. I think the hardest thing for Florida State isn't their schedule. It's how do you manage expectations? None of these guys have ever been in this position before. So they don't know what it's like for people to have high hopes for you. So now you've got to go out here, and each week you've got to be able to manage and perform like no other. LSU, I think after last year, they did a pretty decent job of keeping everything under composure. But how do you manage that going into a Southern Miss 6 days later? Traveling to you'll have 2 back-to-back games before you have a bye week. And on top of that, you have an early bye week, which I don't necessarily care for. But, if you can go into that bye week 4-0, your hardest thing is the hardest opponent you have to manage is the person that you see in the mirror